Let's look at another example of an API, a really popular API, which is the WooCommerce API. If you created the test website, the WordPress WooCommerce website to practice testing, front-end testing, back-end testing, you already have access to this API. It is a full-blown production-ready API that millions of websites in the world actually use, and it is totally free, so we get to play with it. We get to practice testing with a real API, not some API that was created just for testing purpose, but an actual production API. And there is a good chance, or at least a chance, that you go get a job and that job happens to be using WooCommerce because it's really, really popular. So we're going to look at that API in a couple of videos, and we're going to play with it, and we are going to test it. That is also the main API that I use in my automation training, as well as in my automation bootcamp, because just a full-blown API with tons and tons of APIs and tons of tests that can be created. It's just a great resource for us to learn with. So I use it in all my programs, and here, even in the software testing fundamentals, where we're doing manual testing for APIs, we are going to use that. The only thing you have to be aware of it is not just an open API that you don't need credentials. You do need credentials. It's an API for e-commerce applications, so you have to have credentials. And I will show you how to prepare that credentials. Hopefully you've created the website locally, you have your own version of the website. So I'll show you how to create the credentials, okay, just shortly. You can use my site. I will give you credentials, but only read only. So you can test the get APIs, but not the post APIs or the delete or update APIs, because I can't just give a write access to my site that way to everybody, and because people can just delete things that they're not supposed to delete, will just mess up the data for other people. But if I give you read-only access, that's going to be fine. So when you course material, look for a file that says credentials, and in that credentials file, either I have the actual credential or I will have a link. Most likely I'll have a link, so it's easier for me to update. Credentials change all the time. If I take down the site and create a new site, there are new credentials. So just look in the course material that you download from the homepage, and it should be a file that says credentials, and there will be information in there, okay? All right, so let's look at the documentation first. So this, you can just Google it and get to this. I'm also going to put this link in the description, of course. So this is the API documentation. There's a lot of information. You can go through it. It's a good idea to go through it at least once, just understand it. There's a lot of information. It talks about authentication. I'm going to show you how to deal with that very right now, pretty much, and a lot of different APIs. We have the coupons API that tells you what are all the fields that are available, basically available properties in that JSON. This is a RESTful API. And then right here on the side, when you click on one of the APIs, so this is just telling you what the properties are. You can click on create coupon to see what the API looks like. So we have a URL right here, the endpoint. Technically, this is the endpoint. The URL will be including your website. Whatever your website is, you add this to it to get the full URL. So this is the endpoint. Then you have different examples. If you want to do it in Python, there's an example of what it would look like. They are using the library. WooCommerce provides a Python library, and they're using that for this example. But you can also look at the curl, which is basically, you can call this from the terminal. Curl is very universal. You can just use this anywhere to make a call. Even in the Python code, you can actually make a curl call if you want to, but that's not the right thing to do. And also different languages, Node.js, PHP, Ruby. The examples payload should look like, right? The earlier examples we saw, we never really sent data. We sent query parameters, but not in a way of a payload. Here we have the payload, right? Data, payload, those are like words, interchangeable. And then what the response looks like. They have an example of what a response of that API looks like. So in this example, if you want to create a coupon, right? Create coupon, that's what we're going to look at. It's telling us it's a post call, and the data looks like this. Now, this is just an example. It doesn't mean everything they show here, it is required. It doesn't mean the values are those. Obviously, the values can change, but even the required fields, in this case, for example, individual use, I know it's not required. Exclude sales item, that's not required. Minimum amount, that's not required. Code and discount type and amount are the only ones that are actually required. So we probably play with that. I'm thinking first we're going to start with the customers API. So even under coupons API, There is create coupon, retrieve a coupon, list all coupons, update a coupon, delete a coupon, batch update coupons, right? There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different APIs. And each API has so many fields that go. A lot of those fields are pretty much the same on all of them, but they have their own functionality. So you can imagine how many combination of test cases that can be created, right? So when we talk about APIs, the test cases is like a lot. We can come up with a lot of test cases. Just 6 of them. For each one, we can come up like 50 easily, right? Test this field, test that field. What if this field is this? What if that field is that? There are so many combinations of test cases we could create. We could look at the customer API. Again, there is a lot of customer APIs. Create customer, retrieve customer, list all customers, update. Right? For the update, the method is put. This is the URL, and you put the ID at the end. If you see a sign like this, greater than and less than signs, that means it's a placeholder. So you're going to pass ID with that call, right? Orders API, order actions, order notes, order refunds. All of those are APIs. Products are one of the easiest ones to understand. Customers is one of the easiest ones to understand. So there is tons and tons of APIs that we can play with. And we're going to just look at a few of them here. And even in the automation, even in the bootcamp, I have over 100 test cases automated, and it is those, a combination of those, some customer, some coupon, some order, some product, things like that. So when you get to automation part, when you start to take automation, which I highly encourage you, join my training, my self-paced training, even the bootcamp really, but you can start with self-paced if you want. You automate this stuff. Right now in this course, we're going to do manual testing, but you're going to automate this. I probably will show you some automation also here. All right. So this is the API. Now let's start to play with it. The first thing is none of these APIs work without a credential. We can open up Postman. Let me get my here. I'm going to pull up Postman. Okay. And let's say I'm going to close this tabs, the trivia API we've been doing. So I'm going to open a new tab, and let's say retrieve all customers. Let's go to customers API. I'm going to say list all customers, right? This is the API right here. So I'm going to copy this part here. I'm going to go to Postman, paste it. Now I need the website, right? I have demostore.spreadsqa.com. I have the bootcamp version, and I also have a local version. So we're going to use the local version. So I'm going to do localhost 8888 local demo store. This is my site. I'm using MAMP, right? Here is MAMP. This is MAMP. I have my servers running. That's why it's working. MAMP is awesome. I have a document on how to create this site locally. I also have a couple of videos, a 3 video series how to create this. It's really easy. It looks fancy. It's nice. It works properly. It's almost production ready, but it is so easy to create. So I'll link instructions on how to create it. I also have it in a written format, also in videos format. So check that out in the description. Create yours. You're going to use it for a lot. You're going to use it for front-end testing. You're going to use it for back-end API testing, for the database, everything. You invest like 1 hour, create this whole thing, just create this website, and you have a full-blown website. You have full access. Even load testing you can do on this. So I highly recommend that. So this is the site. This is the URL, localhost. Yours is going to most likely be the same, except the name of the site. You can change that. You can call it anything you want. All right. So I'm going to go back to Postman. I'm going to add my site right here. Make sure there is 1 slash. There's not double slash, because when you copy it, you might copy the slash twice. Here it is. It's a get call. I'm going to make a send call. I should get an error. So in 400 something, 401 unauthorized, right? Says WooCommerce Rust cannot view, so you cannot list resource. This means it's credentials, and you can look at the status code 401, right? That itself is a test case, making sure the API fails if you're not authenticated correctly. That itself is a test case. You have to test it if the API fails when you don't authenticate it, assuming that API needs authentication. A lot of the APIs I worked with, they don't need like API keys, but they have to be called within the network, within the company. Either I have to be in the office or I have to use a VPN. So if anybody from the external network calls it, it doesn't have access. So even that is a little tricky to test, but that should also be tested. All right, so how do we get credentials for this API is the question, right? So let's go into the next video and we'll create the credentials. I want to separate it, because if you created the website, if you follow the the videos on how to create the website, I do create the API, the credentials in that video. So you probably already have it, so you can just skip the next one. On the next one, I'm just going to create credentials, and we are going to use it. So maybe you don't want to skip it, you just want to watch it in a fast paced. All right, so let's move on to the next video and create credentials and test this API out with valid credentials.